退院したら今度はあの子たちにうんとわがままをさせてあげるつもりよ。
おいおい。
お母さん笑ってるよ。大丈夫みたいだね。
What makes a good movie? Is it mesmerizing visuals? Is it a fantastic soundtrack?
What country you from?
Is it a layered and meaningful screenplay?
English, motherfucker! Do you speak it? Yes!
And to all of these things, I say, of course. Shouldn't all these things come together and fuse into a great experience? I mean, that's why we have such iconic movies that were hailed for having such fantastic qualities. These films are honored as milestones of film history for how they excelled in most, if not all, the categories I just listed. And a great example of these types of movies, at least the best example I can give, are the Studio Ghibli films. Specifically the ones written and directed by the man himself, Hayao Miyazaki. Except, I think a lot of these highly acclaimed films by him, in my opinion, aren't that great. Before I get hellfire from the anime community, I want to make myself clear. I didn't dislike watching any of these films, by any means, but my problem with a lot of them is in terms of their writing. And yet despite all my issues with the narratives, I still had moments of absolute awe that stole my fucking breath away. An experience I can't say I've had with any other. So how is this possible? How can I say Spirited Away is like a 7 out of 10 movie, and then proceed to have a complete mental breakdown for one of the film's most niche scenes? And the answer to that question goes something like this. Movies aren't checklists. They are art. In the opening scene of Howl's Moving Castle, we are introduced to the main character, Sophie, and this is how we are introduced to her. In about 5 seconds, we are shown Sophie's main conflict and the main theme of the story, the theme of self-acceptance. We can see how this theme contrasts from person to person. Starting with Howl himself, he comes off as a very angelic being who has a presence just as mysterious as his beauty and power. But once we see his slightest imperfections exposed, Howl begins to lose his mind and goes as far as to say, that fat fucking witch bitch is obsessed with Howl's love and attention. She craves for his acceptance of her, and all of this is first shown to us from that first 5-second scene in Sophie's introduction. We don't have to be told that Sophie deals with self-value issues. We're shown visually that Sophie rejects the image of herself. And this is all really fucking good shit. I mean, this is the type of shit that I was expecting. But the problem isn't introducing a theme in these movies, but it's how they follow through and conclude. Instead of having Sophie come to terms with her self-acceptance issues, we have this completely unrelated war plot that pretty much sucks out a lot of runtime for the film that could be used elsewhere, like, I don't know, maybe working towards Sophie overcome her main problem, but instead the characters all overcome this conflict of self-acceptance by all starting to show love towards each other, which on its own isn't a solution I necessarily agree with on a philosophical level, but it also doesn't work on a narrative level either. Because we didn't establish these characters as being unloved, Miyazaki established them as not being able to love and accept themselves for who they are. So instead, we kind of get this out of nowhere solution for these characters where the theme that the movie sets up doesn't really match with the payoff that the story delivers. I don't think Howl's Moving Castle is necessarily a bad movie. I think the film still has some great moments, but I feel like it would have been so much better if Miyazaki had just stuck with the main theme of the story and followed through with it. And unfortunately, this isn't the only case of this type of thing happening. Let's look at Princess Mononoke as an example. Princess Mononoke is very different from most of Miyazaki's films. It's very action heavy, and the film does a pretty damn good job at presenting that action. I mean, fucking look at that shit. But the film also is very open with presenting themes of divinity and racism, and the brutal hell that comes from all those conflicts. Death fogs the air and blood drowns the sea. Violence is shown in a brutal yet beautiful way. Ashitaka doesn't really go through a character arc, but instead he stands as an eternal beacon of unity and true strength. And we have to watch and see how he will be able to resolve a conflict so complex with a shining will that is so simple yet burning with What? The conflict just kind of resolves itself. The main antagonist kind of just gives up with no reason or consequence to his actions that caused almost an entire fucking race to get wiped out. Ashitaka and San have one little scene together that tries to wrap up their characters, and it's just really disappointing to watch. How can we have such good setup just for the payoff to be so shit? And the thing is, I found myself asking the same question after finishing a lot of Miyazaki's films. Why does this guy just let Pazu and Shita just fucking win by giving them the opportunity to? 3 whole minutes? You gave him 3 whole fucking minutes to make a plan? I give maybe 10 seconds if you want to be an asshole about it. But 3 minutes? So you're being a little too generous here. How the fuck does Chihiro know that her parents aren't with the flock of pigs when it's like, they all look the fucking same. They're all pigs. These complaints are obviously a lot more minor than my issues with Howl and Mononoke. But these moments still take me out of the experience and break my immersion, because it's just like, why? It's the conclusion of the story, arguably the most important part in the film. And time again, we're given these really shitty ass solutions to plot lines, characters, and themes, and it's just fucking frustrating to watch. Like, what the f-
キキ、この箱ちょっと開けて。
はい。
それをキキという人に届けてほしいの。この前とってもお世話になったから、ついでにその子のお誕生日を聞いてきてくれると嬉しいんだけど。またケーキを焼けるでしょ？
きっとその子もおばさまのお誕生日を知りたがるわ。プレゼントを考える楽しみができるから。
ほんとね。
For the other 3 Miyazaki films that I wasn't that much into, I don't think they have the same exact problem that the other 4 films I've talked about do. I just didn't really get hooked to the story and characters as much as I did with the other 4 films. And at this point, I feel like it's becoming more of a taste thing. Cause here's the thing. I really like watching Kiki's Delivery Service. Not because I think it does anything inherently better in terms of writing than the other films, but it's just more of a vibes kind of thing. And all these feelings could just be coming from my nostalgia, because Kiki's Delivery Service was actually one of the first 3 Miyazaki films that I remember watching as a kid. But even though I recognize that Kiki doesn't do anything necessarily better, I still enjoy it more than the other films I've listed so far. I can't change anything about that. It's just how I truly feel. I really like the intro of Kiki's Delivery Service, and how it's just this upbeat, joyful scene of Kiki playfully getting used to her witch powers with 70s J-pop playing from her dad's little radio. It sets a very clear mood and setting of the story, and it just feels good to watch. I love how recognizable and simplistic Kiki's design is, while also communicating her character visually. The oversized headband communicates Kiki's childlike nature, and the red only amplifies that even more. The black cloak, however, visually represents Kiki's darker side, signifying her depression and internal struggles of being a witch. But the design is so simplistic that I feel like my interpretation of it isn't even that set in stone. I bet other people will look at Kiki's design and come up with their own interpretations of it. And I like that. And the design itself is just really appealing to look at. It's like, look at it, it's so nice. So many moods are communicated through just the visuals, which communicates perfectly what's happening in the story. Look at how bright the colors are in this section of the movie. It reflects the sense of adventure that Kiki is experiencing as her first time being a witch. Now look at how the visuals shift to create a darker mood. There are many scenes during this section where it is night or raining. We're able to naturally feel Kiki's struggles because the movie communicates that to us through the visuals. I find it so easy to connect with what the film is feeling, and that's why I think the movie is such a soothing ride. Even though I don't think this movie is objectively better than the other ones that I've listed so far, I just like watching it. And one of the reasons why I just like looking at Miyazaki's films is because of the almost perfect attention to detail that is put into the animation. If I could describe Hayao Miyazaki's directing, I would say always choosing the hardest routes and never taking any shortcuts. Let me explain. This is the start of a shot from Kiki's Delivery Service, and Kiki is about to rush around the corner and dash past the camera in a hurry. But we know this already because of the shot beforehand leading up to this and how this shot is framed. So already the viewer has made a subconscious prediction of how she will probably move, with this linear trail showing on screen right now. But let's see how Miyazaki actually portrays a kid rushing around the house. Fucking genius! The thoughtless momentum from her dashing up the stairs smacks her against the wall. But she doesn't go straight into the wall, but more at an angle because of how she was running towards Osono while still keeping the momentum of her running up the stairs. And she doesn't even care. Like, she doesn't even acknowledge slightly that she ran into the wall, and that is shown by her eyes being fixated on Osono as she is running. Not only is this realistic, but it further caricatures Kiki as a kid. You could also view it as an example of Kiki's self-destructive behavior and how she will put all her eggs in one basket and not let anything stop her from achieving her goals, which also shows her childish nature. This is what animation is about. Not fucking Sakuga crazy fucking effects bullshit animation. And don't get me wrong, I like when my characters go. But this is more than just animation. It's telling you a story. It's showing you information about a character and her qualities as a person, and using the medium of animation as a bedrock to deliver that message. And I can keep talking about the technicals all night long. But this attention to detail becomes more than just detail. It becomes a sense of beauty. And when I mean beauty, I'm talking about something truthful and pure, something that gets down to the absolute essence of something real. And I think Miyazaki is able to capture that essence in all of his movies. Let's take this one moment from the Spirited Away documentary. There's a scene in Spirited Away where the main character, Chihiro, is feeding something to her friend who has shapeshifted into a dragon. Miyazaki is instructing this team of animators how to animate this scene, and he compares it to how you would feed something to a dog.
犬飼ってたなんか犬飼ったことあるやつは
But since none of his animators have ever had a dog before, Miyazaki has them go to a fucking veterinarian to go see an actual dog and try to feed it something while recording it so that they can animate a scene where someone is feeding a dragon something and have it resemble more of someone feeding a dog. And I know I'm making it sound more complicated than it actually is, but like, just think about that real quick. Who does this? Who tries to compare feeding a dragon something to what it's like to feed a dog something in real life? But I think the answer is a lot simpler than you would imagine. The only person that would do these types of things is someone who has a great respect for life. So I also want to slightly touch on the documentary on Miyazaki. You know, the one where he takes a big shit right all over his son for making his first bad movie.
僕は自分の子供を見て大人になってない
Putting that part aside, I think the documentary is a great look into Miyazaki's mind and how he truly does put his soul into his works. A lot of the documentary centers around the production of the movie Ponyo. And there's a moment in the second episode of the documentary that touches on Miyazaki's mother, who passed away just before the release of his first film, Najika, The Valley of the Wind. To me, Miyazaki doesn't seem like the type of guy to be that vocal with his emotions. But as a child, when his mother first contracted the disease that slowly led to her death, a feeling arose within Miyazaki. I wish I had never been born. But the documentary shows how Miyazaki has inserted his mother into so many of his movies, especially into Ponyo, where he made a character just for her, named Toki, a bitter but lonely old lady who lives at a nursing home and has a very similar condition to what Miyazaki's mother struggled with: spinal tuberculosis. A disease that made his mother unable to walk and even hug her own son. Miyazaki requested the composer for his movies, Joe Hisaishi, to make a song based off of the ladies at the nursing home, one of those ladies of course being Toki. And you can see while listening to the song that grief for his mother just pours out of his heart, and he takes all that pain and uses it as the ink for his art. For a man who isn't that vocal with such strong emotions, it's so beautiful to see him express it in his art. It's a sad but touching moment that perfectly illustrates just how much these movies mean to Miyazaki. There are so many moments in these films that make me feel a sense of childish freedom. The settings of Miyazaki's movies always feel so magical because of the animation, but it's all held together by the gorgeous and sometimes heavenly background art. Let's take this one scene from Porco Rosso as an example. I didn't think Porco Rosso was that amazing of a film. I thought it was fun to watch, but nothing too crazy. I was kinda waiting for when they would actually explain Marco's past. Marco? Who the fuck is Marco? So we get to this scene. A girl named Fio is snuggled up in her sleeping bag, while Marco prepares for his duel tomorrow against a man who almost killed him in their last duel. Fio asks Marco to tell her a bedtime story, to which Marco does, and it's about him when he is in the war. Marco's plane gets severely damaged, and his plane just begins to glide through the clouds as he starts to pass out. But then he wakes up in a place unfamiliar to him. Marco's plane floats atop a sea of clouds, before looking up to see a contrail slashing throughout the sky. It is at this moment when Marco's war brothers begin to sprout up from the sea of clouds and ascend to the contrail. But then we start to notice something about the contrail. It isn't made of vapor or even gas, but it's made of planes, all drifting together in this heavenly Milky Way, where their destinations are unknown, but even after their deaths, their hearts are still certain. And I mean, look at how many planes are drawn into this background. It's fucking masterful. In this moment, everything comes together, from the story, the art, the ambient but calming music, and it comes together to make this moment special and speak volumes.
私ポルコ好きだもの。おやすみ。
And there are so many moments like these. Nausicaa walking across the golden field, the opening for Castle in the Sky, watching Kiki fly for the first time, Howl walking across the sky with Sophie, Jiro's visions of his aircraft, Ponyo returning to Sosuke. It's the best scene in the movie. In these moments, everything comes together from the story, art, music, and it comes together to make these moments special and speak volumes. I could go on and fucking on about Miyazaki's charm as an animator. Like this thing that he does when a character is expanding with a strong emotion. Their hair and clothes begin to tingle and rise up like a flame. Their eyes begin to glow like pearls. And this emotion can vary from excitement to anger. It's such a good technique. It's like the character is a balloon. Instead of being pumped up with air, it's their emotions that fill them until they pop and release that energy. It's fucking awesome and inspired so many artists in the next generation to come. So we've talked about the writing and visuals of Miyazaki's films, but there's still one more extreme factor that I feel doesn't get as much spotlight as it deserves, and that is the music and composition of Joe Hisaishi. It's good. At the start of this video, alright, fine. I'll try. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think I can do justice by explaining Joe Hisaishi's music through just words. It really is something that you have to experience and listen for yourself to fully understand it. Joe Hisaishi is a once-in-a-century maestro. The reason why I've been playing so many songs from Joe Hisaishi throughout the video is because I don't think I can make this video without those songs. I truly don't think Miyazaki's films would be as good or even the same without Joe. It completes that final picture of what Miyazaki's films are. He's able to capture Miyazaki's vision and put it into a bottle and let that bottle out into a completely different piece of art and finalize his movies into something so unique. Joe Hisaishi's music is just as magical as Hayao Miyazaki's art, and I really do hope people will appreciate that more, because these movies would have been nowhere near as successful without him. At the start of this video, I asked, what makes a good movie? And if it was either stellar art, music, or writing that answered that question. For me, I think it would be the writing. The writing of a story is its core foundation. It is what lets everything else blossom even more. Without good or creative writing, a story falls apart no matter how pretty it looks or sounds. What I consider good writing in a story is when each individual scene builds off of one another, that accentuates a theme or message, until it all culminates in a climactic finale. Most of Miyazaki's films don't have a structure to build off of though. Miyazaki doesn't conform to 3-act structures and character arcs. And while I don't think these tools are required to make a good story, I believe they are heavily recommended for most stories, cause without structure, without a plan, your story is very likely to crack and crumble. So the question is, do I think most of Miyazaki's films are bad? And according to my logic, my answer should be that they are bad. But I don't feel that way because I don't think all movies with bad writing are all necessarily bad movies. And it's because of what I said before. Movies aren't checklists. They are art.
포뇨?
I want to be human. The movie Ponyo is very lighthearted in nature, and this is purposeful, obviously, but not in the way most might think. Underneath the layers of its optimistic nature is a deep-rooted theme of nihilism. Now, I don't want to sound like one of those, haha, look how dark I really am type people, so let me explain. There's a scene in the movie where Ponyo watches a baby have a meltdown in its mother's arms. And Ponyo just has this very focused and understanding look on her face that is kinda difficult to explain in words. During one of the scenes in the Hayao Miyazaki documentary that I brought up before, we are shown Miyazaki actually storyboarding this scene from Ponyo. And as he writes it out, he explains how a lot of children feel like they shouldn't have been born. However, Ponyo is here to tell them that life is worth living. That so many of the things that we take for granted in this world are special and beautiful. She's able to see the value of humanity because she was born from the depths of nothingness. A world where humans don't exist. A world of darkness. So that's why she sees that life is the light that shines in that darkness.
宗介大好き。
And that we shouldn't take that light for granted. Ponyo was one of the other 3 Miyazaki movies I had watched as a kid. My time rewatching it for the first time in so many years was just really nice. I like how laid back the film feels. It feels like one of the only movies, if not the only movie, that would be comfortable falling asleep to. And I never fall asleep while I'm watching something, or even playing a game. Ponyo was the first time I ever felt so comfortable that falling asleep felt like it wouldn't take away from that experience. And that says something, doesn't it? Because I love films. I want to try and take in and digest as much as possible. But it was only when I stopped looking at how far I was into the movie, stopped trying to fixate on what made sense, was I able to let my guard down and truly experience and enjoy Miyazaki's movies. Miyazaki's movies aren't fairy tales. Even if they look like them, his movies feel closer to real life than any other movie I've ever seen. My criticisms for his movies still stand, but I will die on this hill when I say Miyazaki makes films for children and no one less mature than children. When we are children, we automatically surrender to the experiences of life. We live moments out, and those moments shape us into who we grow up to be. But as we grow older, we act as though we understand life to the fullest, which is inherently ignorant. Life offers too much to just be experienced in one life, but it is our job to experience as much as possible before we are gone. The only way to do that is to take in and appreciate moments that most wouldn't, and that's all what Miyazaki's movies are, aren't they? Moments from life stacked on top of one another. Sometimes coherent, sometimes not. A moment from Ponyo that I remember very vividly is right after Sosuke loses Ponyo to her father. Sosuke weeps and weeps like a baby, and this is the scene that follows. Sosuke with worn eyes nibbles on an ice cream, and it reminds me of times where I cried to exhaustion. The feeling after a strong cry being portrayed perfectly in this scene, where maybe all you are able to do is nibble on some cold ice cream against your red-hot face. Even if a lot of these moments don't have grander purpose, they still have the ability to speak to the viewer because these moments feel lived. Remember that scene I talked about in Spirited Away at the start? Well, even though I consider Spirited Away as a whole to not be that well written, this is hands down my favorite scene in all of Miyazaki's films. Let's rewind a bit. Chihiro is a kid who was just forced to move away from her hometown. At the start of the movie, she is shown to still be clutching onto her bouquet that all her old friends and family gave her when she left. She doesn't want to move on from her original life. She doesn't want things to change. But here she is in an entirely new and different neighborhood, and just look at her stick her tongue out at her new school. And pretty quickly after the opening, her parents get turned into pigs, she gets locked into a contract with an evil witch, and shit is just happening to her, and she can't really do anything about it. And so we get to this moment by the flowers. Before this moment, Haku, who is Chihiro's Virgil in the spirit world, had brought her to see her parents since the last time she saw them was when they first turned into pigs. Chihiro is clearly affected heavily by seeing her parents like this. Tears lean off the ends of her eyelids before she runs away from the sight. She curls up into a ball next to a patch of flowers before Haku gives her real-world clothes back to her. Buried in the folded clothes lies her farewell card, the same farewell card that was the first shot of the film. I'm gonna admit it. I'm Japanese. No way, it's the anime character! Okay, but for real though. During my childhood, I was exposed to a lot of modern Japanese culture, and something that Japanese culture really values is the symbol of flowers. If you ever go to Japan, you'll start to see this everywhere. At schools, on buildings, in monasteries, and something about seeing the craft of this card, it reminded me of that past. It reminded me of Japan. It reminded me of my old life. It reminded me of my mother. And I say it like this because when I was a kid, right before I had gone into my teenage years, my mom passed away. That same year, I had moved to a new school. I had lost many friends and family because I lost connections with them. I had new people come into my life that I didn't want to let into my life. Everything had changed so fast, and I hated it. And coming back to the film, this entire time Chihiro has been overwhelmed with the sights of greasy and gluttonous foods that fill the monstrous mouths of these disturbing and otherworldly beings around her. It's been so overwhelming for her. So when Haku gives Chihiro that rice ball, she begins to eat it. And when she starts to cry, I start to cry as well. Because I get it. I get what she is going through. And having all that emotion built up and being released by the taste of something almost forgotten, but something so familiar. I've tasted that feeling before. It's hard, but it's cathartic and a necessary step to be able to move on. And I want to close out the video by talking about the last film that I haven't brought up yet. It's the last one out of the 3 films that I watched as a kid. My Neighbor Totoro is a perfect children's film. And the reason why I love it so much is because it's the most Miyazaki-esque film out of his entire career. There aren't any plot lines. There are no antagonists. There is barely any character development. But even without these things, the movie flourishes in what it's trying to do. Because of the story being as simple as possible means we get to see these characters in their purest forms. The sparkling anxiety of tipping a brittle wooden column back and forth, exploring the dark corners of an unrealized attic, getting lost in the infinite forest, getting in fights with the kid next door, getting stuck in the rain, getting a call that something has happened to your mother at the hospital, and getting into a fight with family. The mythology that has been built around this story is that there are spiritual beings that inhabit this world. Beings like the dust bunnies, the cat bus, and Totoro. The old lady states that she was able to see these creatures as a child, but as she grew older, she never saw them again. So it's established that only children are able to see and interact with these spirits, and that when they interact with them, the kids will vanish from normal eyes. And I believe all of this has a meaning. After all of the childhood chaos that makes up the film, The last scene in the story showcases Satsuki and Mei being reunited and returning to see their mother in the hospital. When they get there, they obviously see that she is alright and watch with gleeful faces up from a tree. They leave her the corn that Mei was saving for her, and
どうしたの？
今そこの松の木でさつきとめいが笑ったように見えたの。
before this point, their mother was feeling a surge of excitement and optimism, and that's when she was able to interact with the spirit world. She was only able to see her children in the trees because she was able to tap into that sense of a child, pure and unadulterated bliss. And I think that's the core message of Totoro, that no matter what happens in your life, no matter how many hardships you go through, you can be just as happy as when you were as a kid. And it was at this moment when I went back to watch the ending over again to retrieve this message, I realized something. I was able to enjoy Totoro and so many of these other Miyazaki films just as much as when I watched it as a kid. It wasn't littered by logic and reasoning. I loved it. It was almost this piece of me that I had lost to time had come back to me and reconnected with me. It was almost like my mother had been with me this whole time. That this entire time, she had stayed with me in the form of these films. She's the one that introduced me to these movies after all. And so I have to ask this question one more time. What makes a good movie? Is it mesmerizing visuals? Is it a fantastic soundtrack? Is it a layered and meaningful story? To all these factors, I say yes and no. Because I think everyone has their different reasons as to what makes a good movie in the first place. And that is the beauty of art. It doesn't have to mean one exact thing. I believe that my unique story to these films lies in the vast sea of unique experiences that so many others have. And I only think those experiences are enabled by Joe Hisaishi's beautiful music and Hayao Miyazaki's heartwarming art and his unique life-lived storytelling. I don't think Miyazaki's films would be the same if someone got a professional scriptwriter, because these films wouldn't be his anymore. They only work because he puts his entire life gore into these movies. And when you put everything into something, sometimes they come out messy, but they also have the chance to be equally as beautiful and magical. That's why I was frustrated, but equally as touched and inspired by his work, because life is messy and magical, but it only is if you let it be. This video was fucking horrible to make. Not just on a technical side or getting a strike for an unlisted video that was 30 seconds side, but also just the way that I approached it. Going into many of my videos, I already have a vision laid out for what I want the video to look like. I have certain sequences laid out already. I know what some thumbnails are gonna look like. But going into this video, I had zero fucking clue on what I wanted it to be. I had the script planned out, I recorded all the audio for it, but when I actually got to the editing process, I was stumped. I didn't know what I wanted, and that was fucking scary for me. I'd like to structure the things that I make before I actually make them. But the editing for this video, I kinda just winged all of it. And I was thinking that it was a little bit funny because that's kind of how Miyazaki writes his movies. He has a plan, but most of the times he doesn't know how it's actually going to end before he actually gets there. And it's a very stressful fucking process, I'll tell you that. But I think this different approach is what helped me actually grow as an editor. A lot of the techniques that I use this video I've never used before, and it was tough because a lot of the times when I thought about this video, I thought it wasn't gonna work out. I thought it was just gonna end up as a fucking bad video. But the more I kept going through the video, the more I kept polishing it up and finding less excuses on why it was bad, I started to realize that the video wasn't bad, but it was just different. And I feel like as a creator, we need to try different things to be able to grow and change. And that's why I'm kind of glad that I made this video, because I wanted this video to be different from others, because the subject that I was covering was different from what I usually cover. And so if you made it to the end of this video, I'm guessing that you probably did like it, and I'm glad for that. Some of the scenes in this video required some After Effects work, which I am literally fucking terrible at, and I cannot even dare fucking approach it without somebody holding my hand. And that person who was holding my hand throughout some of it was my friend named Ethereal, who makes anime edits on TikTok and does some gaming on his YouTube channel. So I put his links in the description if you want to check him out. He does some pretty great stuff, so go give him some love. There was one movie that I didn't cover during the video, and that was The Wind Rises. And the reason I just didn't cover it wasn't because I thought it was irrelevant or bad, because I actually really liked The Wind Rises, but I didn't really have a reason to why I liked it. I thought it was just a good movie. So if you're sad that you didn't hear anything about the movie, then sorry, just go watch it. I don't know. It was a good movie. I just didn't find the place to put that in. The Boy and the Heron is supposed to come out this week as of recording this audio. And yeah, I'm gonna be there. I'm excited for it. I'm gonna see, if Miyazaki doesn't drop the ball this time and makes another, I don't know. I'm not expecting a fucking Totoro out of it, but it looks pretty interesting. It looks different at the very least, so that's what I'm excited for. The possibility of the next video on this channel being a small Shibuya video from Jujutsu Kaisen is pretty high right now, but I want to see how the actual arc itself ends. So far, I have some mixed feelings about it, but the latest episode with Nobara, I thought really did win me over with this arc. It kind of just won me over for Gege for how fucking great of a mangaka he is, and how well the anime fucking pulled that off and just executed that. So the chances of a Shibuya video the size of the Premature Death video are pretty high right now. I don't want to say for certain though. So if you don't see it in the next month or so, it's probably not going to happen for some reason. This video, along with all my other videos, are demonetized for copyright, meaning that I get no money from any of these videos, even if I wanted to. So I've created a Patreon for anybody who wants to help and support the channel so that I can keep making videos without having to worry about, not getting paid. There are certain rewards on the Patreon where you can see videos early before they are released, some behind the scenes stuff, and if you want to make YouTube videos on your own, I have a tier where I can give you some tips on editing and just video making and all that. Right now, for only $1, you can see the uncut version of the Premature Death video that I posted on YouTube. There's over a third added onto the video that I had to leave out on the one on YouTube because of copyright. So yeah, if you want to see more videos from me, even just a $1 tier means a lot to me and is going to help a lot in producing these videos for you guys. So yeah, my Patreon's in the description, please check it out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope I didn't talk too long this time, and I'll be seeing you guys next time. I hope you all have a lovely Christmas if I don't speak to any of you by then, and a very happy new year. So peace out, motherfuckers, and have yourselves a damn good one.